Muli po si Father Dave, sa di po ba, Father, that we may become a better person today than yesterday. Meron pong tanong dito, kapag po ba nakakaramdam ako ng pangungulila sa Diyos, pagkamis, ibig sabihin po ba nito ay tinatawag ako sa pagkapari? Pwede rin pagkamadre? Ang sagot po doon ay, itulog mo muna yan. Ano po? Itulog mo muna yan. Ha? Ikain mo ng masarap, matulog ka. Ano po? Baka bukas, pagising mo, wala na yan. Ano po? But how would I know that I am being called to a special vocation? Number one, all vocations, I mean when I talk about priesthood, religious life, and I think sometimes I do not know about marriage. You can ask married people. Vocation to the priesthood or to the religious life always start with a crisis. It always starts with a crisis. Look at those disciples being called by Christ. All of them started with a crisis. No fish, working all night long, the calling of Peter, the calling of James and John, the calling of Moses being driven out from the kingdom, the calling of St. Paul, name it. Many callings started with a crisis. Perhaps it will remind you of what? That there is really nothing in this world that can really complete you except God. Ganong katalino ang Diyos. He created a heart in you with a hole, butas, that only Him can fill. Kaya nga sabi ni Pope Francis, when people begin to think that they will be happy by getting what they want, by having more money, by being successful, then it will simply bring them to a greater loneliness and prostration. Why crisis? Why crisis? Because God will make you realize there is nothing more important than Him. Pagkamisan kasi, pag cluttered ang buhay mo, punong-puno ka, hindi mo naririnig ang Diyos, hindi mo nakikita ang Diyos, at hindi mo nararamdaman ang Diyos. In crisis, you are made poor, deprived. Nawala yung mga kaibigan, nawala lahat, At makikita mo, at maintindihan mo ang sinasabi ni Santa Teresa ng Avila, only God suffice. Solo Diyos basta. Naintindihan mo. With God, you have everything. You have everything. With everything without God, you have nothing. Look at that. With everything you have, without God, you have nothing. With God, you have everything. Kaya nga, kung gusto mo talaga maglingkod sa Diyos, una, you have to pray that God will call you. God will call you. Second, God will choose you. Because many have been called, but only few are chosen. My dear friends, my brothers and sisters, my priesthood is not mine. I always say this, it is the audacity of God to make me a priest. What do you mean by audacity? God took the risk of making me a priest. I humbly accept this. I can always find people in the congregation that could have been a better priest compared to me. But I was the one being called. I was the one being called. Sana yun ang panalangin. Ano po? Wala yun doon sa nangungulila ba ako, namimiss ko ba? Hindi. Until it becomes a crisis that you will be made realize how much you are loved by God, how much you love God, then only then you can talk about or perhaps think about the vocation to the priesthood or to the religious life. When you say midlife crisis, it is never about age. I disagree when people say, even some books would say, when you reach 40, you will have a midlife crisis. That is not true. That is not true. A crisis is when you are in a cross point of your life. A cross point between your will, your wants, and the will and wants of God. That is a crisis moment. You are in a crisis when your mind tells you another thing and your heart tells you another thing. Yun ang krisis. Yung iba yung iniisip mo at iba ang nararamdaman mo. Alam mong hindi praktikal ang tinitibok ng puso mo. At alam mo namang hindi rin naman, sabi nga, maayos pag inisip mong mabuti, ay hindi rin yun ang tinitibok naman ng puso mo. Krisis yun. Pag dumating ka doon, maybe God has been talking to you. I say, has been talking to you. Because maybe He has been talking to you and you have failed to listen. Don't wait for too long. Don't wait for too long. Mahirap yung nag-asawa ka na, tapos bigla mo sasabihin sa akin, siguro, Father, pinagpapari ako. Hindi na. Ano po? Hindi na. Yan na ikamamatay mo. Ano po? Hindi na. Ano po? Pag nag-asawa ka na, hindi ka na magpapari. Kaya ngayon nagpapari, hindi na nag-iisip dapat mag-asawa. Ano po? Tapos na ang kwento doon. Tapos na ang kwento. Kaya nga po, magandang pagtunan ng pansin yun. That you must be aware how God moves into your life. Honestly, when people come to me asking, Father, am I called to the priesthood? My first question will always be, tell me your story. Tell me your stories. Let me find along your story if there was really a calling. If there was really a calling. Kasi baka naman, nabasted ka lang. Ano po? Nabasted ka lang. O kaya natanggal ka lang sa trabaho at na-prostrate ka lang. Hindi naman sa pagkatanggal ng trabaho, krisis agad. Hindi naman sa pag nabasted ka, krisis agad. Hindi. Magandang pagtunan ng pansin yun. Ano pa? There must be a crisis moment where you begin to realize there is no other option than God. And I pray. Ano po? Yan ang palagi kong panalangin sa mga nanay, sa mga tatay. Huwag niyong ipagdadamot ang inyong mga anak kasi hindi yan sa inyo. Huwag niyong ipagdadamot ang inyong mga anak. Hindi yan sa inyo. Kaya pag sinasabi ko, pabiro man, pwede ho magpari yan. Ang sagot talaga ng maraming nanay, huwag naman, Father. Di ba? Bakit po? Sayang eh. Bakit nga sayang? Gwapo eh. Yun na nakakainis. Di po ba? No? Bakit? Pangit ba kami? Di ba? Kala nyo yata ang hirap magsimba pag pangit ang pari, di ba? No? Kaya nga pag nagpapagawa ako ng santo, dapat maayos ang mukha. Kasi ang hirap magdasal pag pangit ang santo eh. Di ba? No? Hindi ka makapag-concentrate, nagdadasal kang ganyan, sabihin mo, ba't kaya tabingi ang mukha nito? Ba't ganito ang buhok nito? Kaya dapat pag santo, di ba? Ano? Kaya nga ikaw, pag may Facebook, pinipili mo magandang profile. Hindi po ba? Para, wow! Para pag nag-friend request ka, ay, ganda ito. Ay, pogi ito. Pag pangit, ang profile aso, no? Ha? Baka lang. Baka lang. Ano po? Ha? Kaya mahirap yun eh, nag-profile ka. Ba't naman yan ang profile mo? Hindi po ba? Ano? Ha? Secret. Hindi po ba? Ano po? Secret. My dear friends, my brothers and sisters, God will always speak to those who listen. God always speak to those who listen. Remember this. There's no greater joy than being called. How much more when you will be chosen? Muli po si Father Dave, sa di po ba, Father, that we may become a better person today than yesterday.